Some smiles are so bright they seem to promise a long, sunlit day. They're the kind of smiles that make you feel like everything is going to be okay, that the person behind them has it all figured out. In the 1990s, one of those smiles belonged to Merlin Santana. Whether you knew him as the charming, smooth-talking Romeo on the Steve Harvey Show, or as Theo Huxtable's loyal friend Stanley on the Cosby Show, Merlin had a charisma that radiated through the television screen. He was handsome, he was talented, and he was on a trajectory aimed straight for the stars. He had that rare, effortless cool that made him feel like both a heartthrob and the guy next door. But the brightest lights can sometimes cast the darkest shadows, and the story of Merlin Santana is a chilling reminder that a promising future can be stolen in the blink of an eye, not by fate or by accident, but by a lie. His life wasn't just a Hollywood story of fame and fortune. It was a deeply human story of ambition, love, and a devastating injustice that cut everything short. This is the story of a life that ended far too soon, and the shocking, almost unbelievable reason why. To truly understand Merlin Santana, you have to understand the world that made him. He was born in New York City in 1976 to parents who had come from the Dominican Republic seeking a better life. The New York of his childhood was a city of stark contrasts, a place of immense energy and creativity, but also one of grit and struggle. He grew up in Washington Heights, a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan that was and still is a vibrant heart of the Dominican-American community. In the 1980s and early 90s, this wasn't the gentrified, polished New York you might see in movies today. It was a place teeming with life, the air filled with the sounds of salsa and merengue spilling from open windows, the smell of street food cooking on corners, and the constant thrumming beat of a city that never slept. This was also the era of hip-hop's golden age. The culture was exploding out of the Bronx and spreading like wildfire through every borough. It wasn't just music, it was a way of life, influencing fashion, language, and attitude. For a young Afro-Latino kid like Merlin, this was his cultural landscape. He was part of a generation that was navigating multiple identities. He was American, he was Dominican, he was a New Yorker. He straddled the worlds of his parents' heritage and the dynamic, evolving urban culture of the United States. This environment bred a certain kind of resilience, a street-smart savvy, and a swagger that Merlin would later bring to his most famous roles. He wasn't just acting, he was channeling the energy of the world he knew. It was a world where you had to be quick on your feet, where your personality was your currency, and where dreams of making it big felt both incredibly close and impossibly far away. This was the backdrop against which a young boy with a magnetic personality began to imagine a life beyond the block, a life on the screen. Merlin Santana's journey into the spotlight began almost by chance, a classic story of being in the right place at the right time with the right kind of talent that couldn't be ignored. His mother, wanting to keep her energetic son occupied and out of trouble, enrolled him in acting classes. It wasn't necessarily about chasing stardom. It was about providing a creative outlet. But it quickly became clear that Merlin wasn't just another kid in a class. He had something special. At the tender age of 3, he landed his first gig, a fast food commercial for a local restaurant. It was a small start, but it was a start nonetheless. The camera loved him, and he loved it right back. His real breakthrough, the moment that put him on the national map, came in 1991. He was cast as Stanley, the ever-loyal, sweet-natured friend of Theo Huxtable on the legendary sitcom The Cosby Show. At the time, The Cosby Show wasn't just a TV program. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was one of the most watched shows in television history. celebrated for its positive portrayal of an upper-middle-class African-American family. Being on that set was like being admitted to the most prestigious school for young actors. He was working alongside a television icon, Bill Cosby, and a cast of seasoned professionals. For Merlin, this was more than just a job. It was an education. He soaked everything in, learning the rhythms of sitcom acting, the importance of timing, and how to hold his own in a scene with established stars. Though his role was a recurring one, he made Stanley memorable. He brought a genuine warmth and earnestness to the character that made him a fan favorite. He wasn't just Theo's friend, he was Stanley, a character viewers felt they knew. This role opened doors and gave him the kind of exposure most young actors only dream of. As the Cosby Show era came to an end, Merlin faced the critical transition that many child actors struggle with, moving from adolescent roles to more mature ones. This is a notoriously difficult path, littered with the careers of those who couldn't make the leap. But Merlin navigated it with a grace and skill that defied the odds. He took on a series of roles in the mid-90s, appearing in shows like Hangin' with Mr. Cooper and NYPD Blue, proving his versatility. He was no longer just the cute kid from a sitcom. He was a serious actor, capable of tackling drama as well as comedy. Then, in 1996, came the role that would define his career and solidify his status as a 90s icon. He was cast as Romeo Santana in The Steve Harvey Show. If Stanley was sweet and earnest, Romeo was the complete opposite. He was the quintessential smooth operator, the ladies' man with a quick wit and a sharp wardrobe. The character was the perfect foil to the more straight-laced principal Steve Hightower, played by Steve Harvey, and the geeky but lovable Bullethead, played by William Lee Scott. Merlin, Steve Harvey, and William Lee Scott formed one of the most memorable comedic trios in television history. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, and much of it was born from genuine off-screen friendship. The banter between Romeo, Steve, and Bullethead felt real because in many ways it was. They would improvise lines, play off each other's energy, and create moments of pure comedic gold. Merlin wasn't just reciting lines, he was embodying Romeo. He infused the character with that New York swagger from his youth, a charming confidence that was impossible to resist. He made Romeo more than just a stereotype. He was funny, he was stylish, but he also had moments of vulnerability and loyalty that made him feel like a real person. For 6 seasons, audiences tuned in to watch Romeo's hilarious schemes, his romantic pursuits, and his unwavering friendship with his crew. Merlin Santana had arrived. He was no longer a promising young actor. He was a star in his own right, with a bright, limitless future stretching out before him. Behind the confident smile and the smooth on-screen persona of Romeo, there was Merlin Santana the person, a young man known for his infectious laugh, his deep loyalty, and a surprising shyness that contrasted with his public image. His co-stars and friends remember him not as the slick ladies' man he played on TV, but as a warm, grounded, and incredibly funny individual. Steve Harvey, who played his mentor and comedic sparring partner on The Steve Harvey Show, often spoke of Merlin as a son. Their on-screen chemistry wasn't just good acting. It was a reflection of a genuine bond. Harvey saw in Merlin a prodigious talent and a young man with a good heart. He recalled in interviews after Merlin's death how they would spend hours in their dressing rooms, just talking about life, dreams, and the future. Merlin looked up to Harvey, not just as a co-star, but as a father figure in the industry. One rarely discussed aspect of his time on the show was his dedication to his craft. While he made it look effortless, Merlin was a meticulous actor. Kalita Smith, who played Principal Regina Greer, remembered him as being incredibly focused. Between takes, while others might be joking around, Merlin would often be off to the side, running his lines, thinking about the scene. He took the work seriously, even in a sitcom environment. He understood that comedy required precision, and he was determined to get it right. He had a reputation for being the first to arrive on set and the last to leave. This work ethic was born from his understanding of how precarious a career in Hollywood could be. He wasn't taking his success for granted. He was working every day to earn it. There was also a profound sense of responsibility that weighed on him. As one of the most visible Afro-Latino actors of his generation, he felt he was representing his community. He was proud of his Dominican heritage and wanted to be a positive role model. He often spoke about wanting to break stereotypes and open doors for other Latino actors. This wasn't just a talking point for interviews. It was a deeply held conviction. He knew that kids in neighborhoods like Washington Heights were watching him, and he wanted them to see that their dreams were possible. But alongside this ambition and professionalism, there was a private pain. Like many who achieve fame at a young age, Merlin struggled with the pressures of Hollywood. He was a private person forced to live a very public life. Friends have spoken about his desire for normalcy, for a life away from the cameras and the expectations. He was close to his family, especially his mother, who had been his rock from the very beginning. Her belief in him had been the catalyst for his career, and he remained fiercely devoted to her. One particularly poignant anecdote reveals the depth of his character. A crew member on the Steve Harvey Show was going through a difficult financial time. Without making a big show of it, Merlin found out and quietly gave the person a significant amount of cash, telling them not to worry about paying it back. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he saw someone in need and he had the means to help. That was the real Merlin, generous, compassionate, and more concerned with the well-being of others than with his own image. As his career blossomed, he began to explore other creative avenues. He had a passion for music and was working on starting his own career as a rapper. This was his next chapter, a way to express another side of his artistic identity, one that was closer to the hip-hop roots of his New York upbringing. He was collaborating with his lifelong friend, former child actor Brandon Quinton Adams, who had also been in the industry for years. They were excited, full of ideas, and ready to take on the music world. He was in his mid-20s with a successful acting career, a new musical venture on the horizon, and a life full of promise. He was happy, driven, and standing on the precipice of even greater things. No one could have imagined that this vibrant life, so full of potential and so cherished by those who knew him, was about to come to a brutal and senseless end. The night of November 9th, 2002, began like any other for Merlin Santana. He was 26 years old, at the peak of his physical and professional life. After finishing up work, he and his close friend Brandon Quinton Adams were leaving a home in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. They got into their car, two friends at the end of a long day, likely talking about music, their futures, the ordinary things that fill the space between moments. But as they sat there, the ordinary was shattered by an act of extraordinary violence. Two men, Damien Gates and Brandon Bynes, approached the vehicle. Without warning, a gun was fired. A single bullet tore through the car's passenger side headrest, striking Merlin in the head. He died almost instantly. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. It was a story that seemed too cruel to be true. How could a young man so full of life, so beloved by millions, be gunned down in such a cold-blooded manner? The initial reports were chaotic, with speculation running wild. Was it a robbery gone wrong? A carjacking? A gang-related incident? The Los Angeles Police Department immediately launched an investigation, and what they uncovered was not a story of random violence, but something far more disturbing, a tragedy set in motion by a lie. The key to the entire case was a 15-year-old girl named Monique King. In the days leading up to the murder, King had been spending time with Damien Gates, who was 21, and his accomplice, Brandon Bynes, who was 23. On the night of the shooting, King, who had falsely claimed to be older, was with Merlin Santana. What exactly transpired between them has been subject to different accounts, but the outcome is tragically clear. Feeling rejected or spurned by Merlin, King concocted a vicious lie. She ran back to Gates and Bynes and told them that Merlin had tried to rape her. It was a lie born of teenage ego and malice, but in the volatile world that Gates and Bynes inhabited, it was a spark thrown on gasoline. Enraged by the false accusation, they decided to take revenge. They weren't seeking justice. They were seeking violent retribution for an act that had never happened. They armed themselves and went looking for Merlin Santana. They found him in his car with Brandon Adams. They didn't ask questions. They didn't seek confirmation. Fueled by Monique King's lie, they acted. Damien Gates fired the fatal shot. The subsequent police investigation unraveled this web of deceit. Monique King, confronted by detectives, eventually admitted that she had fabricated the entire story. Her lie had directly led to a man's murder. The trial that followed laid bare the senselessness of the crime. Brandon Quinton Adams, who had cradled his dying friend in his arms, gave heartbreaking testimony about the final moments of Merlin's life. He was a witness to a nightmare, forced to relive the horror on the stand. In the end, justice, as far as the legal system could provide it, was served. Damien Gates was convicted of first-degree murder and the attempted murder of Brandon Adams. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences plus 70 years in prison. Brandon Bynes was convicted of second-degree murder and attempted murder and received a 23-year sentence. The instigator of the tragedy, Monique King, was also held accountable. Despite her young age, she was convicted of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder, though her conviction was later overturned. She was eventually retried and found guilty of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years in a youth facility. The controversy and debate surrounding Merlin's death center on this appalling injustice. He was not the victim of a random street crime. He was, in essence, lynched based on a false accusation. His death highlights a terrifying reality, the power of a lie to destroy a life. There were no shades of gray, no complex motives. It was a straightforward case of a fabrication leading to a fatal, misguided act of vengeance. The debate that lingers is one of societal responsibility and the terrifying speed at which misinformation, especially of a heinous nature, can incite violence. Merlin Santana was not killed for something he did. He was killed for something a teenage girl said he did. He was tried, convicted, and executed on a street corner by 2 men acting as judge, jury, and executioner, all within the span of a few hours, based on nothing more than a malicious falsehood. The tragedy is not just that he died, but the profane, senseless reason why. The death of Merlin Santana left a void that can never be filled. The immediate consequence was, of course, the profound grief of his family, friends, and co-stars. Steve Harvey was devastated, later describing the moment he received the news as one of the darkest of his life. He had lost not just a colleague, but someone he considered a son. The entire cast and crew of the Steve Harvey Show, a group that had become a tight-knit family over 6 years, were left reeling from the loss of their vibrant, funny, and kind-hearted friend. His funeral was a somber affair, attended by many from the industry who came to pay their respects to a young man whose light had been extinguished far too soon. For his family, especially his mother and his young daughter, the loss was immeasurable. a permanent wound inflicted by a senseless act. Beyond the personal grief, Merlin's death had a significant cultural impact. He was one of the most prominent Afro-Latino actors of his time, a trailblazer who brought a specific and authentic identity to mainstream American television. In an era when roles for Latino actors were often limited to stereotypes, Merlin played characters who were cool, intelligent, and aspirational. He was a role model for a generation of young Black and Latino kids who saw themselves reflected in him. His success on 2 major network sitcoms demonstrated that there was a broad audience for stories centered on people of color. His death was not just the loss of a talented actor, it was the loss of a powerful voice and a symbol of possibility for his community. The horrific circumstances of his murder also forced a difficult conversation about the devastating power of false accusations. The story of Monique King's lie served as a chilling, real-world example of how a fabrication, particularly one as inflammatory as rape, can have fatal consequences. It highlighted a dark aspect of human nature, the readiness of some to resort to violence based on hearsay, without any regard for truth or due process. Merlin's story became a cautionary tale, a brutal illustration of what can happen when rage and assumption override reason. It forced people to confront the uncomfortable reality that a person's life could be ended not by their actions, but by the words of another. In the years since his death, Merlin Santana's legacy has endured, albeit tinged with a deep sense of what if. What other roles would he have taken? Would his music career have taken off? Would he have become a director or producer, continuing to open doors for others? These are questions that can never be answered, and that is part of the enduring tragedy. We were robbed of the chance to see his full potential unfold. Today his work lives on in reruns. Audiences still laugh at the antics of Romeo on the Steve Harvey Show, and they still feel the warmth of Stanley on the Cosby Show. On platforms like YouTube, clips of his best moments garner millions of views, with comment sections filled with messages of love, nostalgia, and sorrow. People remember his smile, his charisma, his comedic timing. But his story is more than just a collection of memorable TV moments. It is a profound lesson about the fragility of life, the poison of lies, and the importance of truth. Merlin Santana still matters because his life was a testament to talent and hard work, and his death was a stark and brutal reminder of the injustice that can exist in the world. He was a bright star who didn't burn out. He was stolen from the sky. In the end, the story of Merlin Santana is a heartbreaking symphony of unfulfilled promise. We remember the laughter he brought into our homes, the effortless charm that made him a star, and the vibrant energy that promised so much more to come. He was more than just Romeo, the smooth talker from the sitcom. He was a dedicated son, a loyal friend, a proud Afro-Latino man, and a father. He was a serious artist honing his craft, a musician on the cusp of a new chapter, a young man navigating the complex world of fame with a grace and humility that touched everyone he worked with. His life was a testament to the idea that talent, hard work, and a good heart can carry you from a tough neighborhood to the brightest stages. But his death serves as a brutal, unforgettable lesson about how fragile that journey can be. He wasn't the victim of a tragic accident or a complicated feud. He was the victim of a lie, a simple, cruel fabrication that ignited a senseless act of violence. It's a chilling reminder that the most destructive force in the world isn't always a weapon, but a word used to poison and deceive. Merlin Santana's story forces us to look at the profound injustice of a life stolen not for who he was, but for who someone falsely claimed him to be. And as we remember his brilliant smile, we are left with the deep aching sorrow for all the smiles, all the roles, and all the years that were taken away.